What's going on, guys? Sensible Prepper Live. We are going to be talking about something today that I think is one of the most important things that we can talk about as a country, especially if you believe in our Constitution, if you believe in the American way of life. And we're going to go through a few things, but as usual, while we talk about a lot of the things that are going on and why you should be aware, why you should be seeing things, which we're seeing it on the news, is what can we do about it? And that is one thing I think that's really lost with the more conservative side, the side that really wants to, again, preserve our Constitution, our way of life. And what are the threats against that? Now, we're seeing it. But before we get started, we're going to talk about and thank Exotac for sponsoring today's video. And Exotac makes some of the best fire starters in the world. I mean, they're made down in Winder, Georgia. They're just very ingenious, and you get a 20% discount using Suits20 with the link down below in the description. But why do you need a fire kit? It boils your water. It cooks your food. It gives you heat. It gives you light. It can keep predators at bay, and it just builds good morale. So whether you go with Exotac or not, guys, have a fire kit, have it set aside, know how to use it. It's just one of those things. And again, we really appreciate Exotac. Also, one of the books that I just highly recommend, and I've been doing this forever, I'm just going to go ahead and bring it out, is The Modern Survival Guide for the Coming Economic Collapse. Now, not necessarily are we dealing with that, even though gold prices have shot through the roof, silver has gone through the roof even more and more. I mean, it's getting serious, but this is one of the best books. It's about actual events that happened down in Argentina, which will help us with what we're looking at today as well. Gives you more of a well-rounded, real-world SHTF type scenario that actually happened. So it's not just a lot of imagining, which is very easy for us to do. But I think our imagination is getting more and more in focus over the past few years. So what we're going to talk about today is protest to revolution. Protests are one thing. Even inciting problems and what we're seeing across the country right now, because the protests can turn violent. The protest can kind of have some organization to it. But what leads it to a complete revolution, and why it's very important for the U.S. government to take action legally to stop revolution. And so we're gonna get into that. I think hopefully you'll find this interesting. I know I did. Now, I'm a big fan. In fact, I've been subscribed to the Forward Observer for a long time. And it's Mike Shelby, former intelligence officer for the military, and he does a great job of putting a lot of things together. He monitors things that are going on, especially from the left, different things that they are working on. They're monitoring, and they have all kind of contacts all over the U.S. I don't know if you know this, but there are over 2,800 protests currently going on in the United States. They have a protest map, and it's 2,800 current protests that are going on in every state, somewhere. A lot of times it's in capitals. It's actually, I mean, it's just rampant. Now, we have the right to protest. You do. You have the right. In fact, it's a God-given right. It's in the Constitution. You should be able to protest. Protest does not mean violence. Protest does not mean attacks on people. It doesn't mean destruction of property. It doesn't mean any of those things. It means to actually verbalize and protest and say, hey, we're standing against this. It could be a march. It could be standing on a street corner. It could be whatever. But what it's not is when it turns violent. That is not a protest. And unfortunately, sometimes the waters get a little murky, as we saw during the BLM riots and the Antifa and all the stuff that went on with the George Floyd riots and different things. Now, what's happening is we've got some really hot spots right now. And I will say this, it is really good to see some of the action that's being taken to control some of this stuff. In the past, we haven't had a lot of protection, and we really haven't known what to do. And unfortunately, there have been groups that have stood up from the right, but then they were nitpicked and taken down for different various reasons, and they were actually targeted where it just seems like the left can do whatever the heck they want to do without any real consequences. When you have the vice president of the United States putting her personal money into bailing out different people that have been causing problems, that's a problem. That's a big problem. Okay, so one of the biggest things right now in the news is this immigration. It's the ICE agents, the federalization, where they're going in and they're cleaning up the streets. Obviously, with Washington, D.C., that was a big deal when Trump went in and kind of took care of things, said, hey, look, we've got to get this cleaned up. Crime is out of control. And it is. Crime has gotten out of control in these big cities. And so it's like, we've got to do something. These people that live in these cities, these lawmakers, I mean, this is the capital of the United States. Now, first off is we've got to have two things. We've got to have legitimacy. It's got to be legal. It's got to be, where they are doing the right thing. But it can be legitimate and still be painted as illegitimate. So it has to have credibility. So whatever that's going on has to have some credibility. Unfortunately, we have a very biased media outlet overall that seems to push that left narrative, kind of takes that angle. Now, we're not talking about liberals here. We're not talking even about, well, unfortunately, the Democratic Party has really gone more toward the real left, which is something that we cannot tolerate if we're going to keep freedom, if we're going to retain our freedoms. You've got to be careful. Yes, you can be liberal. Yes, you can have different ideas. You can do whatever. And those people are they do protest, and they do. But when it starts to get left is when the violence really starts, and they want to force their intentions on not even necessarily a majority. They just want to get something started. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But right now, ICE is working in like 19 states. I mean, pretty aggressively working in 19 states. 9 cities. Currently, there are operations going on to clean up the streets, get all this stuff straightened up. Trump has mentioned this before, is this cashless bail, these light sentences, these slap on the wrist. Again, we have members of Congress that are actually bailing out people that have actually created violence, gone beyond a protest to more of an insurrection. And that has to be stopped. We have to keep going on. We have to keep our voices going on. Antifa becoming a domestic terrorist organization on the watch list, being controlled. That has caused even more uprisings, caused more problems. So we have these ICE detention centers that are being attacked. They're actually being, federal officers are being exposed for their home, where they live. They're being attacked when they go and they start to bring in people that are, according to the law, and this is legitimate, that have broken the law, and they're being taken and put in detention centers. And we have people, which is funny, it's not just other immigrants. It's a lot of people that are just, they're just bleeding hearts. And listen, I understand. We've known a lot of people over the years that are probably, we don't know this for a fact, that could be in that position. Not necessarily criminal elements, but here's the thing, guys. Once you cross that border illegally, you're illegal. It's just the way it is. And however we want to look at that is one thing. And I don't want to get into all the nuances of, the immigration policy necessarily. But to me, you have broken the law once you come across that line without the proper vetting, without the proper paperwork, with whatever. So we've had a crisis at the border, but now that crisis has moved from people pouring over the border to make it actually worse, to where we have people within the borders that are causing a lot of problems, and they have a lot of supporters that are sympathetic. Again, my son Seth, he has a really good friend that was born here, that lives here, he's a citizen, everything else, but his father had neglected to keep up with his paperwork and was sent back to Mexico. And you know what? It's tough. I mean, here it is. You've got a grown adult. His dad gets hauled down to Mexico. It's tough. It's not like this is just black and white. And I want to say, hey, We need to just do this. Listen, I'm very sympathetic. And over the years have worked with different companies where people that work there may or may not have been there legally and loved them. They're good people. A lot of the people, especially coming from the south of the border, they're good people. But we have to have law, and we have to have borders, and we have to have ways to bring them in. One of the things that I saw this just recently, we're talking about people that are coming into the country that don't add anything. They're not skilled. They're just here, or maybe they're working, they're doing stuff. Maybe they are, but and those are the kind of people that actually we could use if they do it in the right way. You need something fixed at your house, man. If you want to try to get somebody, you can call a crew of guys usually from South America or Mexico that come in and they do a good job, and they just do a good job, and they're good and they're friendly and they're cool to work with. But we also have a large element of people that are coming into the country that they just coming. They're just here. And then when they get here, they don't want to assimilate into our culture. And here's the problem, guys. The big problem is that if we don't have commonality, then you're going to have fractions. You're going to have tribalism. You're going to have a lot of problems. Unfortunately, this causes a lot of problems for people that have succeeded, have done well, have worked hard for the American dream, and really have a lot to lose. And then you got all these people that have nothing to lose. And so it makes it a very difficult position for us that are just trying to live like we have always lived and to have the American dream. And that may be, having a house and a good job, but it also means being able to have opportunity, not guaranteed, but you have opportunity to create businesses, that you have the ability. And of course, obviously, some people are more apt to being successful. Maybe they work harder. Maybe they just have a certain bent that they, want to save their money and they want to build something and they want to do something. And that's negotiable. But when you refuse to assimilate, when you have whole communities that are like what's going on right now in Michigan, Dearborn, Michigan, where, they're wanting to have their own law in Michigan, in parts of Michigan, the Sharia law, that's completely contrary to our Constitution, completely. Now, you may be a Muslim, and that's whatever, that's fine. But if you're here and you're not willing to integrate and become part of our great American experiment, and then we have something, you're pushing for Sharia law, that is the opposite of our Constitution, period. It just is. Freedom of religion is one thing, but trying to change the law into something different is just absolutely not acceptable. Or if it is, we can see what's going on in Europe right now. And it's kind of scary to watch what's going on in Europe. And you look at that and you go, really? Are you people just suicidal? I mean, do you want to just, give up your whole traditions, the way your way of life? And we're going to get to that in just a second. Now, another thing that we're seeing is, of course, terrorist acts that are happening. I mean, out of nowhere. And of course, we saw with Charlie Kirk, which was a horrific, really a call to action in a sense. I think that Charlie Kirk, to me, was like Paul the Apostle. I mean, he had that kind of authority, and he was changing lives, and he had a movement, a turning point. And to me, after his death, it spread all across the country. And so there's been a big movement toward more American, conservative, even Christian ideals that really form this country. And so we're seeing that that's spreading. But then we see church being shot up and burned to the ground. We're seeing ICE detention centers, people being shot and killed. What's really sad about that was the guy that did that, he killed some immigrants. It wasn't even that he got the ICE agents. He actually killed some immigrants. So his whole plan was a mess. So we're seeing this uptick in these attacks. There was a guy in North Carolina that rode up on a dock where we go eat when we're down there near Calabash, North Carolina, and just in a boat pulled up to this place and just started shooting it up. And they got him. But, these attacks are coming out of nowhere. And typically they're left. The one thing about it is guys, and you, whatever your political persuasion is, that's up to you. But I'm going to give you my take on it. The thing is we're seeing the left really rising up to violence, which the left is the one that wants us to disarm us, to take away our rights, to take away our freedom of speech. To, the one thing about Charlie Kirk, aside from everything else, was that he said that debate is the thing we have to keep open. Once debate has been closed, violence will happen. We have to keep the debate going. And two, we're seeing too that some of these people that have taken up the banner of Turning Point and they're going to these universities are getting, like, some of them are actually being run off by these groups of people. And we need to have freedom of speech. We need to be able to have the speech and to be able to discuss ideas. And there has to be some kind of respect. And we're seeing that this is a loss of respect, that they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear the other side at all. And so that's definitely a problem. Another big thing that we're seeing is that a lot of these school shootings or these mass shootings are done, unfortunately, by transgenders. In fact, the last 10, one guy was gender fluid, the rest were transgender. That doesn't mean that all transgenders are that way, but it definitely means that there are some issues with that. And that's something that causes more problems. It causes more violence on the left because they don't like it. And then you got the right calling it out, and then it's more of a struggle. Again, and I want to mention Sharia law again. That is something, again, that is incapable of allowing the Western culture. It's a diametrically opposed to the Constitution. It's force, it's whatever it is, it needs to be curtailed. You can, again, Muslim, whatever, every race, every creed, religion, doesn't matter. But when you start trying to change the law to something that is completely against our freedoms and our Constitution and what we believe in, even if you're not a Christian, then that has to be stopped. Just like we did when, and it's hilarious because they seem to kind of coincide with a lot of the Marxist ideas. A lot of the Antifa, a lot of those that are prone to violence, the left, are very much in bed with the Marxists, which kind of is in the Islamic faith or not the faith, but the Sharia law is definitely one of those things that kind of coincides with that as well. And it's like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and then we've got some problems. Now, let me just say this. There is a lot of chatter. Telegram right now. When there's things going on Telegram, there's certain sites or certain accounts that just blow up. And then when everything kind of calms down, they kind of nothing. And then it'll blow up. Well, right now, there's a lot of chatter. Not only Portland is one hotspot that happens a lot, but when it gets to national, there are some national Telegram, like leftist ideals that are putting out information. And a lot of this has to do with leading up to the midterm elections. The one thing about the midterm elections is they really want to get us back into a more leftist voting bloc. And so what we've got is we've got people that are redistricting. A lot of these different states are starting to redistrict, and some of them are actually becoming stronger GOP strongholds. And so there's a lot of chatter back and forth that with the midterm elections, that could set off something. And so that's going to happen in 2026. There's a lot of experts that are talking, including Mike Shelby from the Forward Observer. I'm just telling you guys, it's a great newsletter. They have a lot of things that go on over there. I don't know Mike, but I've been following his stuff for a long time. And just really solid, direct intel of what's going on, so you can kind of see it. But that's one of the things he's big about, is with the midterm elections, we could be seeing a lot of violence. It could be similar to what happened a couple of years ago with the BLM and with Antifa and a lot of the things that were going on, but it could be a lot bigger than that. Now, let me stop here because I didn't mention this at the beginning. We're going to take a break here in a few minutes. We take questions. If you have questions, you can leave them. Sarah Mack's over on the computer monitoring things, and we'll take a break. She'll offer those questions to me. One thing right now is birthright citizenship. And these little things, and this is going before the Supreme Court, these little things a lot of times become banners for the left. Again, what's legitimate, what's legal to do, has to have some credibility to it, and it's according to how that credibility is interpreted. A lot of times I will know that this is within the law, and then we'll have someone stand up in Congress and completely just shatter it. And honestly, shatter it with a bent. And that's gets into people's minds. I've been talking to a lot of younger people lately about some things, just ideas and how they see things. A lot of times they're not in tune with the news. They're watching, cat videos or whatever, or gaming videos or doing whatever. And they are really not aware of what's going on. Another problem is a lot of people on the right, we are those that really support the Constitution. And I don't really want to say the right, because really it's more center. And I think Trump mentioned this the other day. He said, he says, I'm not far right. Now, some people would disagree with that, but he's not. He's very thoughtful about what he looks at. That is my opinion, but it's a pretty credible opinion. But here we've got to the far right is, that's a fringe. The far left is a fringe. But the people in the middle, those are the people that are looking and thinking, and that's really typically the majority of people. Is they're wanting the things to, they want to live their life and they want to do their thing. They don't necessarily want to be political. There's a lot of the ideals of both sides that they may or may not like. And so, there's some give and take. But really, we've got to be able to, whoever wins over that middle group are the ones that are going to be more in power. And so we just have to decide, are we going to hold on to our ideals or are we going to throw them out? So if we have some questions, Sarah Mac, you can bring them to me when you're ready.
Paradise 8888 says, I'm going the homesteading route and live in upstate New York. I'm looking into planting year round by building an addition to my cabin that's a heated greenhouse to grow food. Your thoughts?
Awesome. That is awesome. I think that, that definitely extends your growing season. Listen, here's the thing about it, guys. Prepping, and this is one thing I've been saying a lot lately, is if you're prepping and you're putting things together, you can't do it all. You can't. It's impossible to do it all. Maybe unless you're Mark Zuckerberg, who's building a bunker in Hawaii, stocked with food and everything else. And listen, if Mark Zuckerberg's doing that, I think it's kind of smart to at least think about this. But prepping, you can only go so far. Now, what prepping does is it buys you time. Now, really the end of that, to me, the real where you're going to be really more prepped is when you do homestead, when you do get more self-sufficient, you're able to sustain. That's huge. Having your own gardens, having your own water sources. Water is going to be a big one, guys. Water is vital. You can only live 3 days without water. So having that and being able to raise animals, be able to have some freedom and autonomy where you can, no man's an island, but man, I want to make myself to where I've got myself in good shape. So to me, homesteading is like the end all for prepping, if you really want to take it that far.
Bible Show and Tell says, is it a bad idea to go to NFL games? I hope that's not a stupid question.
No, and thank you for saying that because, I know a lot of you guys, and you hear these threats a lot, but the Al-Qaeda threats that have been going on lately, some of the chatter that's been going on, they're really starting to take it very seriously right now with the intel communities. And so major sporting events, everybody, it's fun to go to a ball game, but you make yourself somewhat vulnerable. Going to parades, for that matter, has gotten to be kind of crazy. Watching what's going on.
I'd like to add that a lot of those places like football and baseball, places like that are heavily secured as opposed to places like parades and such.
Good point. Yeah, they are.
A little safer.
That's one thing about ball games. Typically, yes, they are a lot more monitored. So there's a lot of security. You can't just get in. And so good possibility, unless there's somebody that actually works there and I'm sure they probably are screened before they can go in. But so that's a good point, is big sporting events. It's places that don't have it. Concerts, even though concerts have security, it's not like it is. Churches, obviously, have become a target. You listen, make sure that your church, whatever it is, if they don't allow carry, which some states do, some states don't. Some states, like here in South Carolina, you have to have permission to carry. You can carry, but you got to have permission, or you can carry. But that is something that's been targeted. So, like for the church we go to, we have law enforcement, and I was actually part of the security team at one point at that church, and they are very good. So, I feel better about going there because there is security. There's a lot of security actually, but not necessarily every church. And it seems like the one problem, except for this church that just got attacked, is in Michigan, is that I don't know what kind of security they had, but the guy just rammed his truck, through the front door and then shot up a bunch of people, then burned the place down. That is to me crazy. And they said that a lot more people would have been injured and killed had they not been down at the front with communion. So that allowed them to get out. But still, churches right now, even if you go to the church to help secure, they are a target.
Robert Harold asked, "Hey, Such, when will you be in another meet and greet event in Atlanta area?"
I don't know. I'll probably be down at Watkinsville for the Georgia Bushcraft. That's an incredible event. It's about an hour outside of Atlanta. And I go there every year, and they're having their fall event. I think it's in November. I don't have the dates. You can look up Georgia Bushcraft to see, but I think that's my next event. I have been to so many events this summer that right now it's kind of like a downtime. So I don't really have anything lined up. I was at the GOA goals meeting, and I was at Smith & Wesson, but that wasn't a meet and greet. And of course I was at NRA as well. And that was down in Atlanta. That was a really great event. So, but yeah, I think the next event that I'm going to will be at the Georgia Bushcraft down in Watkinsville, Georgia, which I highly recommend. Casey Deming has done a great job putting together some really great experts, and there's a lot of different classes, and they have a lot of vendors, and it's just a great weekend, and you can camp, and it's just tremendous. So that is my next event. Okay.
Matt J says, question, I am fairly young and have only started my preparedness journey within the last couple of years. How do I find good, like-minded people in my area? It seems hard to do without telegraphing to the wrong people what you're doing.
This is true.
And also, Oskovich says, same question as Matt.
Yeah, it's hard to find, or in the past, it's been more difficult to find prepper groups. And prepper groups are very vital. People are going to be your biggest asset, regardless of supplies. People are going to be your biggest assets because the brain power, you can figure things out. One thing that's happening here in our area in South Carolina, there's an upstate prepper group on Facebook, and they meet at a big meeting room, and they come in. You can be pretty much anonymous, and you can come in and hang out, and then you start to network with people, and they do different things. So if there is a preparedness group, because guys, there are people that have really upped their preparedness game all across the country. And it's become really something else. So maybe seeing a Facebook group, and or this is the thing, guys, too. And this is something that I've told. It's like fishing. You go and you're around some friends, and you just go, man, have you heard what happened? Blah blah blah. Or what about the water shortage? Or what about this? Or what about that? What about with hurricanes? And you can go to different things and just watch their reaction. See what they say. Don't spill out all your beans. Just go, man, it's just a little crazy the way things are going right now in the world. And then see what they say. And if they act like, we'll be okay. Or, then, just let it go. But you sometimes can find people that are like willing to talk, and they start to have a passion, and then they'll start to confide in you. Don't tell them everything. They shouldn't tell you everything, but start to make connections that way. You could be at your church, at a gun shop. There are some preparedness stores in certain towns and certain counties or cities, and you might be able to connect with people there. Another thing to do is to get to know your area of where farmers markets, or like for us, there's a place down where we get all of our beef, and they're preppers and they're great people. The guys that I buy gold and silver, buy my precious metals from, Upstate Gold here in Greenville, South Carolina. Great guys, and they will, I got to know them, and they're just great, and they have a somewhat of a preparedness mind. So you run across people like that, but typically you can just talk about, some subjects and let people decide, and then don't try to talk them into something. Just let them talk, and then, because I've always said this, you can't push a rope. So just the people that are in your sphere of influence, just maybe mention something. Say, hey, what do you think about this? And let them kind of talk, and then maybe you can establish some relationships. We have a great prepper group, and we meet on Sunday nights. And I'm going to tell you what, it's like family. Because we get together, we have we do, like, everybody brings a dish on Sunday nights. We have certain themes. We'll hang out and eat, and then we have a prepper meeting, and then we'll do things together. We'll go places, we'll do things, and we become a family. And that's what you really want to be careful, is not to get into we're a group, and this is your position here or your position. Let it be more relational. And then what'll happen is I would die for that person. And you're building these relationships, these really good friendships. So people see what's going on. So try to connect with those kind of people. I wish I could say go here. In Facebook Marketplace or Facebook groups or whatever, you might be able to find somebody in your area that's hosting some stuff, because the better that my neighbor's prepared, the better I'm prepared. So, okay, we'll come back to some more questions in a second. Okay, now we've talked about legitimacy and credibility. So the thing is it legal? Like actions that the federal government are taking, actions that don't impose on our real rights. Protest, there's nothing wrong with protest. Protest is part, again, of our foundation. It's our way of being able to voice our opinions. When you can't voice your opinions, though, that becomes a problem. Now, then we have credibility. It could be legitimate. It can be whatever, but it can be interpreted as being wrong. Oh, look what they're doing. Oh, they're abusing that power. Oh, what is this? And a lot of times the media and social media can kind of twist things around, and it really gets you off kilter. So the big thing is again, it's got to be legitimate, whatever actions they're taking. And it needs to be more transparent. It's like, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. This is what, and then be careful about your news sources. Just be careful, because a lot of times they are tainted with little inflections of their voice or little doubts. They plant seeds of doubt in your mind. On the other hand, you need to be circumspect, and you do need, just because it's a conservative labeled organization, sometimes they can go way out. So you got to be careful with that too. Know your news sources, know them, and get to know them, and really think about it. And be open, don't just be like, because that's what typically the left has done. The right can do the same thing. They can do the same thing. Okay, so this is the big one. This is one of the big things, and we've got to really watch for this. You got protests, and some of those protests start to get a little past protest. They get into a little bit of insurrection, or they get into a little bit of violence, or they're burning buildings down, and all in the name of their ideal. And they're downtrodden, and they're, and be careful who you look at as the underdog. So first you have these protests. Again, there's over 2,800, in fact, almost 2,900 protests that are currently going on across this country. That's a lot. The next phase of protest is organization. So when a protesting group, Antifa, and when you have people that are being paid to protest, These people don't have jobs. There are organizations out there right now that are hiring people. We were looking at one on, I think it was Telegram or it was one of the social media accounts where they said, we will pay you this much. If you are ready to rumble, if you want to, bash some heads, if you want, this was honestly a group. In fact, one of my buddies was going to sign up for it just to see what it was about. And they'll pay you like $50 an hour or whatever. So you got these paid protesters out there that honestly, they won't talk to you because they don't even know why they're there except to collect money and just to raise hell. Pretty much it. So you have these groups that are starting to fund the protest and the insurrection. And then what they're doing is, if you go to jail, they're bailing them out. Now, with ICE coming in, well, I'm going to get ahead. Okay, then there's organization. Organization is when you start to have a national cohesion of the protest. When you start to have a seriously organized protest with a cause, if the government doesn't step in before it really makes the full transition, I want you to follow me here. Protest to organization. Once it gets really organized, the next step is revolution. Revolution is extremely difficult to stop. If we don't stop it in the organizational phase, then it is going to be a revolution. Now, you're like, okay, that's a little scary. Listen, I can see the protest. I can see people being ugly and violence, and they're attacking people, and they're burning down buildings, and they're doing that stuff. That's just like mass, just mob. It's a mob rule. We've seen the organizational methods that have been going into it, but it's not complete. I look at that and I go, I don't know what to do about that. Here I am. I've got a job. I'm busy. I've got work to do. I've got a family. I'm going to church. This is going on, and I see it, but I see it like, oh, it's over there. Or I might even see it in my town, but, typically it doesn't get too wild. The problem is once it goes into the organizational phase and they start really pushing it, if the government, again, doesn't stop in and stop that, then, again, it goes to revolution. Now, where are these coming from? Well, everybody knows that George Soros is behind a lot of this, and his son. There are also other global players. We've seen some stuff with, especially in China. There was a guy there that was actually, he wasn't even Chinese. He was there in China. He was sending money into the U.S. to cause disruptions. There are other organizations, and a lot of this has to do with this global initiative to force countries. Because I'm going to tell you what, guys, you watch the UN and watch those leaders get up and just pander to this massive immigration that's coming in, or pander to different sexual orientations or whatever, and it disrupts the fabric of what Europe's about. They're being paid. And another danger right now is this digital ID. I know in England, they just implemented it. They said, if you don't have a digital ID, you will not work in England. You will not work in the UK. They've done the same thing in Vietnam. Those are methods to organize and to subdue groups of people. When it hits revolution, so the one great thing is right now, the federal government with this immigration policies, and with ICE and with these different groups, is they're not above the law, but they need to stay within the law. But as far as what we're seeing is they are enforcing current federal law. So they're out there stopping the organization. They're bringing it. They're putting the brakes on the organization. They're searching out these groups. And they're looking and they're investigating them, and they're going, okay, if you're putting money into these groups to cause an insurrection, that's illegal, and then we have to take steps to take care of that. So the federal government right now is doing that. Thank goodness they're actually acting, because what happens is if you wait until the organization is complete, then it's too late. Then you're going into revolution. Now, what about revolution? How can we stop this? how can we as individuals? Now, I've not been one to go to protest, to be a counter protester. Just not, because, and actually in our area we haven't had as much, even though we have had some stuff here in this area. At this point right now, and I want you to think about this, right now in Europe, there are huge counter protests that are going on. In England, there was it was one of the biggest protests ever. And it wasn't a protest, it was a counter protest of patriotic people that were from England, that lived there, that were functioning there, that wanted to save their culture. They're putting up flags everywhere, and it's really making everybody mad. And they're doing things all across Europe. There are these large counter protests. I know in New Zealand, the Moras, which they're hilarious. They are coming out and they're like doing this dance and everything, and they're Christian, but they're saying we're done with this, and they go hooba hooba, and they get at the front. They do this whole thing to counter protest Islamic growth in their nation because they're being somewhat overrun, because they're just opening the doors. Again, if Islamic is one thing, Sharia law is definitely the antithesis of democracy. And when I say democracy, it's not a democracy. It is republic. It is a constitutional republic. And democracy is mob rule. And for whatever reason, they want to always talk about, we're saving democracy. No, we're not. We don't want democracy. We don't. That's two wolves and a lamb voting on who's for dinner. We don't want that. We don't want mob rule. We want to have rule of law. We want to have rules and laws across the nation that protect our rights and protect us, protecting our rights. So, counter protest are going to be vital. They're going to be vital because what it does is it brings in a sense of, oh, these people aren't just it. Really, when you see these protests of these other groups and they come in and they do their thing, there's nobody to counter it. Not even the law enforcement. They're just kind of standing back. It is time to counter those organizations, because here's the thing: you've got to take a stand, just like with Charlie Kirk and his big thing. Doesn't mean you're going to go out there and do violence. That's against the law. So you don't do that. But you do counter protest, and you do stand for what's right, because if you don't speak, no one will. Many of you guys, you're out there like, hey, I don't have time for that. Well, if you don't, you're going to have time for a revolution, because then you won't have a choice. So what I'm saying is be ready to not only go and march down the street, but be bold in saying, this is not right. That is not cool. This is wrong. We're not standing for that. Is there a chance of you getting hurt or injured? Yes, there is. But you got to decide, is it worth dying, kneeling, or you die with your boots on? And I know that's a little bit extreme. Hopefully we won't get to that. But if you get to a revolution, you're going to see some crazy stuff. And we just do not want that here. So we have to take a stand. It can come in many forms. But the first form is to state your opinions. When certain things come up that are not congruent with what we believe, our Constitution. I'm not even talking about Christianity. I'm talking about just the Constitution itself and what protects our freedoms and has really provided a lot of opportunity. That's the reason why so many people come here. We've got to be under the banner of our Constitution. That's what puts us all together. That's what puts people from India, people from Mexico, people from China or Japan or Asia, and then of course the Europeans, and it puts us all under one rule instead of fractured tribalism. And we don't want that, because the problem is a lot of times these tribal groups will join, and then you have a revolution. So if we have some questions, we'll go ahead and go to that, and then I'll finish up with a couple of things.
Boxer Papa says, Don, in light of the potential increased violence, have you changed your vehicle EBC? Thanks, from Central Florida.
Yes. In fact, I did a video, and you can check this out. And it was actually my sleeper cell EDC. Now, that was really geared toward what happened in Iran because of our bombing and pretty much crippling their nuclear program. And so I just started thinking, because there was a lot of chatter about possible sleeper cells and all that. And guys, they've been saying that I remember that back from Iran when they had the Iran-Contra and when the U.S. Embassy was overrun. They've been talking about this forever. So, we'll see. But with Al-Qaeda right now, there may be some possibilities. With that being said, I definitely have upped my game. One of the things that happened with me was I went to a smaller caliber, like I run around with a Bodyguard 2.0 and 380 ACP. It holds 10 to 12 rounds, so it's got a lot of capability. But I went ahead and went back to 9 when I'm out. Not when I'm home, I still have it. But when I'm out, I've upped that. I have upped pepper spray into my EDC, whether it's in your vehicle, on your person, whatever. Here's the thing about it. In a protest situation, a firearm being brought out it's going to be limited. I mean, and it's very dangerous. I'm not saying you shouldn't have it, because you should, but we've seen that in the past. But the one thing about pepper spray is that if you're able to get out of a situation, pepper spray is going to help you to do it. And I've not always been a big fan of pepper spray over the years until we started having the Antifa BLM kind of situations going on. So then it was like pepper spray is a big plus. I saw this one guy, he was trying to protect his business. He had a samurai sword, and he was standing there in front of his business, and about 12 to 15 people came up, and he was standing there kind of threatening them. Well, they got him. And they beat him to death right there in front of his business. So possibly having a weapon or whatever, pepper spray is going to help. Pepper spray is a big one. And just up your EDC game with your flashlights, making sure you've got something that you can use as a self-defense tool. But anyway, check the video out. In your vehicle, definitely I have my rifle in there and have it secured. You can run cables through it and go through your seat, and not everybody's going to have some wire cutters or some bolt cutters. So make sure it's secure, because you don't want it to be taken. But there are things that you can add. And definitely that video hopefully will get you kind of moving, but it's called EDC for sleeper cells or something like that. And it's been in the past few weeks.
Nameless Ghoul 308 says, hello from Western New York. How much should I prioritize getting a standby home generator, or should I put the money into other preps and home security? Thanks.
Well, power is important, and generators, I mean, especially with winter coming. Winter generators can be big, especially with your refrigerator. You have certain items in there. That's one of the biggest things we do. Immediately when we have power outages, we hook up the generator to the refrigerator. We also have solar powered generators like EcoFlow with solar panels, things like that. But we kind of have a dual. But it's limited for gasoline. What I would recommend, honestly, if you're just thinking, okay, what should I put my money into first? Well, think of the rule of threes. You can live 3 minutes without air. You can live 3 hours in extreme harsh conditions. You can live 3 days without water, and you can live 3 weeks without food. Medical and self-defense flow in between. That is a basic survival, just I'm going to survive. So shelter is the 3 hours in harsh conditions. You need to be able to keep yourself warm, or in extreme heat, you need to be able to keep yourself cool. So, but having the self-defense and the medical is going to be vital. Emergency services may be down, but I would highly recommend stocking up on some water and food first. Get you a little stash, work on that. Build it up, especially water, because again, you can only live 3 days without water. And the minimum, really, they say 3 gallons a day, but minimum is a gallon of water a day. And then figure out your food source, and maybe you might have a way to filter your water. Generator is going to give you power. It's going to give you heat. It's going to give you a lot of options. But to be honest with you, if I was looking at a generator and I did not have water, I would be going toward water. There are some very reasonable generators out there. Some of those more silent. I know Honda makes one, but I think they're called inverters. But in fact, we bought one from my parents that was a Generac, and it's one of the smaller ones. It's a little bit quieter. I think you really need all, because the thing is, you're going to use a generator in power outage. But if, as far as your food and your water, that's going to be more just on basic survival. So that's really where I would, and medical, make sure you get those things down. But again, the rule of threes will really help you to kind of formulate your plan. The generator will come in 3 hours in harsh conditions because it can keep some things cool. But typically they're a little bit smaller, and they're not going to run a heating and air, unless you have a larger generator. So I'd take care of the bare basics first, and then maybe go with a generator. That's just my philosophy. Somebody might disagree.
DC Ren says, are there any indicators to look for when protests will move to revolution?
Well, the thing is, and that's where the Forward Observer to me is a big plus, because they are really monitoring things. They're looking at different sources. They're because these guys are all intelligence guys, former intelligence guys from the U.S. military, so they know where to look and how to track. It's actually pretty fascinating what they can do. But watching, like right now, even before when they were having the Antifa riots, they would have these handlers come in, and they were working in the background. The organization is coming. So we've got to really get this stopped. And I think that's the one thing, thank God, that they're kind of taking government action now before it's too late. And it's kind of like old Barney Fife used to say, is to nip it in the bud. And so when you're seeing these organizers, and you're seeing these paid organizers, not just protesters, they're paid organizers coming in, as long as they're within the law and they're organizing the protest. But when they are inciting things to happen, and these violent acts, that is where things are going to start getting really dicey. We've got to be careful. And guys, the thing is, it says, you see something, say something. If you know something's going on, you need to call it out. And hopefully we've got an administration right now that is not just allowing this stuff to happen, but actually stepping in, recognizing what's going on. And as long as they're legitimate, and as long as they're credible with our media, I don't know who watches most of the media anyway. I don't even, Fox I will watch, but even then. So knowing where the focus is, and then being careful. But again, guys, as much as counter protests may be uncomfortable for you, it may be something that is definitely in our future if we're going to save our republic.
Matt J says, what scares me the most is European men never thought their country would be in this condition it is. How do we prevent it? I think the number is up to 30 arrests per day in the UK just for social media posts.
Yes, and they're letting rapists and gang rape stuff go on. I don't understand the mentality. Kirastama, or whatever his name is in the UK. I mean, I don't understand why he thinks that he's making things better for the English people. I really don't understand it. And it's really sad to see incredible, beautiful cultures that have been around for centuries, whether it's England, France, Spain, Germany, all these different countries. Honestly, I admire the Polish, the Hungarians, and these other countries that are going, no, we will not bring in all these immigrants into our country, because it's changing the whole face. I think that somebody mentioned that Sweden, they were getting ready maybe to even be more than 50%. What really scares me is if Europe becomes Sharia law, there's a lot of nuclear power that's harnessed there, and who has the controls over that. It's kind of a scary thought. So we've got to make sure we stay strong here in the U.S. and drop that, because again, you may be Muslim, you may not like what I'm saying, but Sharia law, I am completely and totally against, and has no place here in the United States, period.
JCCC says, I read yesterday that Canada has another sweeping buyback deadline looming soon. They already took ARs, now more military collectibles.
Canada's going with Europe, and it's really sad. It's really sad. And you know what? Vote. If you're Canadian, you're voting. One of the things, though, that as far as an insurrection goes, is a lot of this has been talked about, the color revolution. If the general population, the majority of the population, has certain ideals and certain mentality, and yet the government is going against it, then typically they're stealing elections is what they're doing. And they're illegitimate and they need to be overthrown. And that's where it's a good revolution. When it's a Marxist revolution trying to take over, that's a whole different ballgame. So, the thing is, guys, is what is protecting your freedoms? What is protecting your opportunities? What is protecting your freedom of speech, your freedom of self-defense? All these things, that is what we need to be pushing for. And limiting our government to where it needs to be, because it needs to be legitimate. The thing that really scares me right now is this Mandami or whatever in New York, and socialist, Muslim, which whatever, but if he's for Sharia law, which there are indications that he is, it's incongruent with the West. They can't abide together. Again, then we go to already an organization to revolution. One of the things that that a lot of times they play on is that they're the underdog. They're a minority. Oh, we're poor. We've been downtrodden. But their ideals are contrary to our ideals. So you know what? Sorry, you're an underdog, and thank goodness you are, because we're not going to allow you to do that here in this country. And that's just I'm just straight up about
it. Addicted to Tools asks, question, I'm having trouble scaling my preps. What's a good goal to have to know each category is covered? And what should I look for based on what I already need guidance on that and storage? It's not easy to make sure you're staying in the right direction with things.
No, it's not. It can be very difficult if you're not organized. And one of the things about food is having a system, and you need to have some kind of system. First off, you need to have a system of rotation. For us, we have to go through every once in a while, and we make sure that, we're using things that are in the front, and then we're moving it. And then when we restock, we should put it in the back. There are even organizational things that you can put cans in that drop down, and it's whatever's the oldest is up front. But calories, knowing what calories you have, knowing how to have a balance of proteins, of vegetables, of different things that you're going to be eating, making sure that you have a good balance of those different foods. One of the things about canned food, guys, and this has been big for us, is we buy a lot of canned food, and because the shelf life is long. Just because it says best by date doesn't mean anything. The processes that go into canning food now, the sanitary conditions, the sealing, the heat, all the different things that they do, it makes these fruits and vegetables and meat last a long time. So having an organization of your food, also with water, again, you can live 3 days without water. So you need to make sure you have a water source, or you have some water stored back, and then a way to renew it. It's a gallon of water per day per person minimum. And that's just drinking water. That's not like washing your hands and cleaning off your face and maybe flushing the toilet. So, really 3 gallons of water is really the optimum of what you need. Storing it up in bottles and jugs may not be an option. For us, we have big water containers that we try to keep our water in. And we have a rain catchment system, and, we have a spring, and we have some other things. And we have a creek on our property, which we need to treat. But, having medical supplies, now that's something that you can't really put a measure on because you don't really know what you might need. But one thing I would highly recommend with medical is gauze, tons of gauze. If someone gets injured, you've got to redress that. You've got to change that dressing out over and over. And if you don't have enough gauze, yeah, sure, you can use shirts and jackets, but they're not sanitary, they're not sterile. So having a way to be able to keep that going. And of course, having tourniquets and things like that, but just having medical supplies. And again, there's no way to really kind of line that up with what you need, because medical happens when you, like I said, it flows in between. And self-defense. You need to have some methods of self-defense. Some of you guys live in areas where it's not really friendly to self-defense. And if you ever had to use something, you may be facing legal and civil and criminal backlash. But having some way to defend you and yourself and your family and those around you. And so, that's something you need to make sure you don't have, like a 357 Magnum revolver and you got one box of ammunition. You need to have some ammunition stocked back. I can't tell you how much. When COVID hit, the gun shelves emptied out, ammunition stores emptied out, and for what reason? So self-defense is important. Just be rational and have needed. And again, there's no way to really quantify that.
Elena Breck just did a $5 super chat, by the way.
Elena, you're wonderful. Elena's absolutely wonderful. She's part of our Patreon group too. But it is difficult to know what you need to do. But I think taking an inventory of what you have and looking through it, I think will allow you to be able to say, hey, we need to fill in here, we need to fill in there. Because if you're not careful, a lot of times people are buying gadgets and things, and they're just doing, and you're wasting their money when they really need to focus on just basics of survival. Fire kits. Fire kits are very important. Again, it can boil your water. It cooks your food. It gives you light. It gives you heat. You're not going to survive long without fire. Whether it's in the electrical grid or you got a generator going, fire is vital. And Exotac, again, 20% off using Suits 20. Build yourself a fire kit. And that's one of the first things that really is important to do. Okay, well, we've been through it, man. Well, I'll tell you what, again, I want to just mention Forward Observer. Mike Shelby does a great job there. And it's very reasonable. And I get their newsletters. They do live events. They do a bunch of stuff on their website that'll just help you to stay informed. And they have current intelligence going on all the time. It's really vital in today's world. So I'm trying to see if there's something I've missed. Yeah, just know what the heck's going on around you. And that's one way to do it. And Mike's not I pay for that subscription. He doesn't know me. Also, the Modern Survival Guide for the Coming Economic Collapse by Ferfowl. There's a link down below in the description, because I just bring this book up a lot because it gives you real world experiences. And it won't necessarily be the same, but it'll definitely give you some of the basics of how to line things up. Big thanks to Sarah Mack for getting the questions to me. And thank you guys for being here. I'm not trying to scare you, but guys, you need to be prepared, because again, the better I'm prepared, or the better my neighbor's prepared, the better I'm prepared. And I want you guys to be prepared. We need to hold on to this great American experiment, this experiment in freedom. And guys, they said it over and over, that the tree of liberty is watered by the blood of patriots. And we've got to stand firm to keep these liberties for not only us, but for our children and our grandchildren. It is vital. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic.